Sports games are not something I highly regard. To collectors, they can be the bane of their existence when trying to track down that very rare sports title for a decent price, or that they may never even play. Some gamers are really into them though. On the NES, even the bad games can be interesting. One of my main goals when I started collecting NES was to beat 100 games as a self-imposed challenge and a barrier. Games like Little Samson and Dinosaur Peak are hugely expensive, so I made a pact to beat 100 games, or roughly a seventh of the library, before I was able to purchase them. When I got to about game 90, I realized that there were golf games that would be an easy target. 18 holes, leisurely gameplay, it was a perfect opportunity to get some games beat. This might seem like a cheap move, but hey, it counts. The NES is home to some of the hardest games of all time, so some enjoyable, easy ones were a treat for getting this far in the first place. So without any further ado, let's take a look at some golf games. One of the original black box games, aka the launch titles, for the NES was Golf, and it's a pretty okay game. I don't much like sports games, nor do I have much experience with golf, but I played and saw some as a kid, so I get the idea. There's not much music and it's hard to get down the timing of hitting the ball, but the layout is nice as well as self-explanatory. One thing that's not though is the golf clubs. I don't really know one from another, but with a bit of experimenting I figured it out. There's even wind and angles to get past the land layout that can be very tricky. It isn't easy to keep up with the par, but it's not really about that. There's a 2-player option too, so this could be a fun multiplayer experience as well. Being an early NES title, it's very simple but enjoyable enough as a golf game. Overall, it's about a 6.5 out of 10. Not bad at all. A bit slow, but good nonetheless. Released by Nintendo in 1991, NES Open is a great golf game and a natural evolution on their previous attempt with Black Box Golf. Here there are several new game modes, including a single-player mode comprised of 3 unique 18-hole courses that are titled under US, UK, and Japan, a multiplayer mode wherein you and your friends can go head-to-head, and a tournament mode. It gives the game a lot of replay value as well. The battery backup can save high scores in progress too, which is a huge improvement. Let's just get one thing out of the way. The presentation here is pretty impressive. The graphics of the course as well as the characters are well defined, and the animation looks really solid, as well as the Mario Bros, alongside Peach, are here to add recognizable characters, which is a nice touch. The world is very vibrant and has that Nintendo polish about it. The overhead map function is incredibly similar to golf, but just looks cleaner and much more clear. The music that I heard was alright, and it lent the right mood for sure. In terms of gameplay, many of the major problems I had with Black Box Golf have all been fixed here. The ball is easier to hit given that there are 3 speeds to choose from this time. That doesn't mean that I still don't miss a swing occasionally, but it's less spotty. The club is also set automatically to which one the game recommends. It even shows an estimated distance, which is very much more helpful as well. Overall, this is a much better golf game than Nintendo's first offering. It's leaps and bounds forward in every regard, which makes it feel almost like a sequel or a remake of the classic Golf. The presentation is top-notch, the gameplay feels right, and above all else, it's a pretty fun experience. I really enjoyed this one. Highly recommended. 8 out of 10. There's not really much to say for this next one. Pebble Beach Challenge was released by Bandai in 1988. Basically, it's a very streamlined golf experience. It only shows part of the course, as well as your character, who's just some guy. I don't know, it was nice before playing as Mario. Maybe it was just the livelier graphics and the better soundtracks, as well as the atmosphere in general. This game just feels bland in terms of level design. It's just more of the same. The one song that stands out reminds me of Kakariko Village from Zelda, which makes me wonder if Nintendo actually ripped it off from here. The one really nice thing is that the swing meter is a lot clearer and more intuitive to use. The clubs get chosen for you like in NES Open, so that's alright too. Otherwise, it's just a standard no-frills golf game. It has a 2-player mode, but that's about it. No additional gameplay or content, which means it lacks in the replayability department. Overall, it's an average game and it's not entirely enjoyable. It's okay, but I would never choose it over NES Open. Black Box Golf had its problems too, but I thought that was at least a bit more livelier. This isn't. Not great, not terrible. About a 5 out of 10. Konami is arguably the best third-party developer on NES. While I personally prefer Capcom, their rap sheet is undeniably classic. the Castlevania series, the Contra games, the TMNT games, the Metal Gear series, Goonies 2, Gradius, the list goes on. But there's a handful of sports games they did too, like Double Dribble, Blades of Steel, and this one. Now, I hear that those other two are great, but this dud is not, unfortunately. 1990's Jack Nicklaus Golf is not the greatest 18 holes of major championship golf that the title would mislead you to think it was. Maybe that's referring to the recreation that they've done of all what is considered to be the compilation of some of the greatest golf holes ever, but my god, the draw distance on this one is extremely limited. Konami decided on a third-person view rather than a map overhead like the rest, but that's fine, it worked for a few of the other titles. Unfortunately here, every time you hit the ball, the screen has to redraw itself because of the landscapes it's loading. If that's not bad enough, the graphics aren't even that impressive. They're bland and they don't at all merit all this redrawing and whatnot. It's tedious and it was a bad decision on Konami's part to include this. It makes the game an absolute slog to attempt. And with the new third-person perspective, it also makes aiming a lot more difficult, especially when the level design is built to your detriment. The swing meter is okay, not great by any means. I can't really see how to switch the clubs, which is a major problem as well. It's not a very intuitive game, even the music is grating, and it's surprising given that Konami usually at least excels at this. Overall, this is a tediously boring golf game. It's ugly, its control isn't great, angling is a real bitch, and the redrawing of the screen and letterboxing of the playing field is atrocious. I can't believe Konami released such a painfully dull and bad golf game. 2 out of 10, don't even bother with it. SNK is one of the biggest hidden gem publishers on the NES. They would go on to have a big hand in the Neo Geo, but in the NES days they released some kick-ass titles, like Crystalis and Guerrilla War, Iron Tank, the Baseball Stars series, and the Ikari Warriors trilogy. Then there's Fighting Golf. To start, it's a huge improvement on the games like Pebble Beach and Jack Nicklaus. It opts for an overhead map view with a lush 3D course, which stands proudly over Konami's efforts, as the screen doesn't have to tediously redraw itself every time. The music is also much livelier, which is nice and it makes the world stand out more. The aiming is decent, but it's hidden behind the B button, which is actually alright once you get used to it. The other nice thing is that you can select between 4 distinct and well-drawn characters, which looks great by NES standards and adds a little bit of personality. Multiple game modes, 2 sets of courses, US/Japan, and a 2 to 4 multiplayer option gives this one a decent amount of replayability too. My gripes are minor, the main one being after 12 hits the player is forced to give up on the hole and proceed to the next one, which is dumb and unnecessary. An option to switch this off would have been great, and it would have made this one a lot better. The swinging meter isn't my favorite either. It doesn't feel as good as some of the other ones, but it's serviceable. Overall, I like this one quite a bit. It isn't perfect, but the environments are at least the best so far, and the characters and animation make it feel more vibrant. The mechanics are solid, and it feels like a competent release overall. Good job, SNK. Another solid NES game. 7 out of 10. Atlus is an amazing company with some of my favorite games of all time, like Persona 3 and 4. They had quite a good reputation for some hidden gems back on the NES too, with games like Rockin' Cats, Wacky Races, Friday the 13th, Karate Kid, and Widget. Unfortunately, they also had a hand in publishing this sorry title. All the aforementioned games are Atlus developed, but 1991's Golf Grand Slam is developed instead by Tosei. Tosei actually has quite the legacy themselves, developing games like Mappy Land and City Connection and Pinball Quest to name a few. They did a few of the bases loaded games too, and even the Pebble Beach game we mentioned before. And that must be where they pulled their inspiration from, because this game is on par with that one. The one good thing that can be said about this game is the incredible intro, which is pretty well animated for NES standards. There's only one mode, but multiplayer can be done up to 4 people as well. There's also a password feature, so you can start up the game at any hole you want. That's a nice touch if you don't have an hour to devote to it. The trouble is this is apparently a golf simulator. This means no handy power meter, but instead a dot that moves around on the ball randomly. This was a really dumb decision on their part. The game keeps saying my grip is off, and I couldn't figure that out at all. It's very confusing and unintuitive to say the least. It's just bad. The atmosphere is okay, but it's really not impressive at all. No music either. Atlas should have passed on this and finished Time Diver Eon Man instead. That game looked like it was going to be awesome. This trash is sadly not, though. 3 out of 10. Golf Power was the last of all the golf games made for the NES, releasing via Virgin Interactive in 1992. Developed by Gremlin Interactive, this is another golf simulator. I shudder due to the Golf Grand Slam, but this one is actually a pretty interesting release. There's no campaign mode, nor tournament mode, or any other modes of that sort. No, this is what I can only describe as the Mario Maker of NES golf games. The sole purpose is for the player to create their own courses and play through them. There's even weather controls and difficulty settings, player adjustments, and all sorts of bells and whistles. As a concept, that's extremely cool. I'm sure people who like golf would think this is awesome to create and customize their own courses. There's a good amount of ways to do it, so this very much succeeds with what it set out to do. The play control isn't bad either. The power meter is strange, but it works okay. The environments and the characters are well detailed. There's not music outside of the title screen, but it's one interesting tune to say the least. The game is even capable of 4 players using the 4 score, not that it matters much, but it's cool anyway. Overall, there's nothing wrong with this game, but it is what it is. If you want to build some golf NES courses, then here's your game. For people like me who haven't got a clue though, you'd be better to stick to NES Open. 6.5 out of 10. There's some interesting features in each of these games, and if it weren't for memory limitations, I would have loved to have seen an NES Open that had a creation mode like from Golf Power, the graphical quality of fighting golf, and maybe even some of the better handling of the other games. Sadly though, it's not meant to be, and what we're left with is a pretty alright handful of games altogether. You know what? Some of these games are nice. Most of the other NES games are hard as nails platformers and are aggravating and super stressful. Sometimes I just need to zone out with some NES Open and have a chill time. It's nice to know that there are chill golf games to fill in the void between when I can't focus all my strength on the next incredibly difficult game. For that, I think a few of these are worth checking out. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more of my reviews, here's my other series of those. Or maybe you'd like to see the intensity of my Pokemon Gold Nuzlocke series. It's ramping up to be quite the finale, so here's a link to catch up on that. As always, don't forget to keep it classic and stick around for more reviews and underrated games. See ya!